Okay, I don't see anybody else in the waiting room. So maybe we can go ahead and get started. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining this kickoff for aRoundTable 2021. We're very excited to have you all and share a bit more about what aRoundTable is, a bit more about this kind of global circular economy collaboration initiative that we're planning to have for the next few months in order to help our communities basically co-design solutions to build back better. Just so everyone is aware, this session is being recorded as well. So we will post the recording in case you drop out or you miss any parts of it. We'll make sure to give you all access to the recording so that you can also share it amongst others in your communities who perhaps weren't able to make this kickoff session. Yeah, we can go ahead and get started. So the agenda for this quick webinar is this kickoff is to kind of give a short welcome to everyone and introduce kind of the genesis of why we started this initiative. And then we have two amazing keynote speakers, Professor Martin Charter and Duncan Mays, who are going to be sharing some perspectives on designing for the circular economy and circular economy projects happening in different cities and communities. And then we'll have a bit of time for some Q&A for the speakers, if any have questions for them. And then we'll provide an overview of aRoundTable 2021, the kind of process and the timelines for our event series to bring different communities together to collaborate and co-design circular economy solutions. And then at the very end, we'll have some time for Q&A and networking so that you all have a chance to meet each other as well. So who is kind of organizing aRoundTable? We are essentially a group of circular economy community leaders. So I myself used to lead Circular Economy Club Milan, and we have others on the team who are part of Circular Economy Club Melbourne and Circular Economy Victoria. And we have also members of the O2 Global Network who are supporting our efforts as well. And essentially, we kind of came together last year because we were looking at the sort of impacts of the coronavirus. During the sort of height of the pandemic, we saw that many communities were being significantly affected by COVID-19 with rising unemployment, huge shifts in sort of the way they work, the way they live. And we kind of questioned, what ways can we make our communities more resilient, and how can we really use circular economy thinking to help our communities rebuild and make sure that in the future that our communities don't face the same kind of issues. And in order to do that, we kind of decided to come up with this concept of aRoundTable. And essentially, we thought about a sort of way to bring together communities locally and globally around the same table and really develop circular solutions for a post-COVID recovery. And we'll share more later in the session, but the aim that we wanted to get out of this kind of event series is to really help design and activate actionable concrete projects in our communities in order to fast track the circular economy transition and really help communities and cities build back better from COVID-19. And before we kind of get into aRoundTable, we wanted to kind of invite our two speakers to share more about what designing for the circular economy means and what kind of circular economy initiatives exist in various cities as sort of inspiration for for a session. And so I'd like to invite Professor Martin Charter to present. He's the director for the Center for Sustainable Design in the Business School for the Creative Industries at the University for the Creative Arts in the UK. And Professor Charter will kind of share some perspectives of designing for the circular economy. So Martin, I'm not sure if you are unmuted. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yep. And you're going to give me, I can shift my slides. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you now have remote control.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Shyam, and thank you for the roundtable for the introduction. So I'm just going to give a very quick introduction to myself, then a bit of an overview, and pick off a couple of key topics relevant for this agenda. So let's get the technology working first. So, right, that's me. I involved in a lot of different initiatives going back to the late 80s. I attended the Earth Summit, I worked in business, academia, founded a charity, Repair Cafe charity, which I'll come back to, which is very relevant to building local resilience. So, few books. I'm not going to go into great detail here. It's a bit of a delay here, not moving. Oops, cut books. It's slow. Not moving as fast as I wanted it to. Okay.
Here, I can advance the slides as well for you, Martin, if that's...
Yeah, I think if I remember right, we found the same problem before. It just was not moving fast at all, the slide. Yeah, right. I want next slide. Next slide. And sort of various books, but more recently focused on this this book, really trying to bring together best practices thinking around product sustainability. And next slide, please. So let's do it like this. Yeah. Okay. So if you can control the slide. So also very recently we've completed a state-of-the-art study on looking at circular economy in the context of the G20. Italy having the G20 the end of this year, and one of their 4 focal areas is going to be circularity. Next slide, please. We also just recently completed some work for DG RTD and the Commission looking at product policy and circular economy. Next slide, please. And also totally another different direction, looking at circular business models and waste fishing gear, which we've been doing a lot of work with in the context of ocean marine plastics. So next slide, please. And lastly, less related to circular economy, but also a review of new activities in China around so-called green design products and green products. It's been a big shift in China as to what they're starting to do. That's a conversation for another webinar. Next slide, please. So basically, key thing I always start the presentation is we're really talking about sustainable development, the bigger picture, 17 global goals, recalibrated in 2015. Next slide, please. And that circular economy touches a number of those goals. In some countries and amongst some thought leaders, the mindset is circular economy is everything, sustainable development is dead, and no. But this is prevalent amongst some people who have actually joined the agenda relatively late. They don't understand the context, they don't understand the positioning, and so this is always an important starting point from the context I come from, at least. Next slide, please. So what we've seen, and I put this into Google Trends, is to really an analysis of the use of the term circular economy. So we really started to see from sort of around about 2012, and this is quite a useful visualization because it sort of probably aligns with our feelings about how the agenda has really picked up. I mean, we saw it in 2008, the world's first circular economy law actually in China. But the Chinese approach is slightly fragmented. One of the most progressive countries around, in effect, circular economy has actually been Japan, but that's another story. Next slide, please. So, but the key thing to recognize is that sustainability, if you want to call it sustainability issues, go in waves. We saw really, a significant focus around climate change in the sort of 2000s, and everybody, particularly at a company level, was focusing on low carbon. Then we've sort of moved into other spheres where, again, climate change has come back in the 2010s. But the key thing is we shouldn't just get locked into the waves that come. We need to keep that broad picture. And we particularly now need to be, looking at this, circular economy and its relationship with climate change, for example, joining the agendas up, not just getting into a myopic focus. Next slide, please. So perspective is everything. We have to, keep that perspective, but dive deep, but keep that perspective. Next slide, please. So Paris Accord was very important. We're going to see the COP, happening in the UK in Glasgow soon. But 2015 was a very important year in that we saw three key things. We saw the Paris Agreement. We saw the recalibration of in effect, the SDGs, but we also saw the Circular Economy Action Plan 1.0 from the European Commission that pulled a lot of the policy initiatives together, and that has actually now been updated in last year with the Circular Economy Action Plan 2.0. So the clear direction of change is one change. Circular economy is on the agenda at a national level. Some countries, Netherlands, Finland, and a number of other countries, Sweden, are really leading the charge now. What we're also seeing is a series of other international organizations forming, World Circular Economy Forum, PACE, the Platform for the Acceleration of Circular Economy, and also the recently launched Global Resource Efficiency and Circular Economy Alliance. So you're seeing a lot of initiatives emerging, but a little bit for me, where's the added value? Where's the distinct differences? So it's getting quite a complicated agenda. And as many as in the area, there's almost a webinar to attend every day now. And some of these webinars are getting, very large attendances. So there's a growing interest. Next slide, please. So, but the coronavirus really hit everything and slowed many things down, and I look at my repair cafe in the context of circular economy that I'll come back to, in effect, we haven't run a physical event for 13 months now. One of our conventional style events, but again, I shouldn't run ahead of myself here. I'll come back to that. Next slide, please. So again, this is what many people, certainly in March, April last year, were thinking, what the hell are we going to do? What the hell is happening? How are we going to adapt? And some people haven't been able to adapt, but in many areas, it's actually driven a lot of innovation. Particularly, from a little bit of work, we're starting on recalibrating some work we actually did just before the pandemic around the creative industries, and its relation to Industry 4.0 and sustainability. We reckon that COVID in effect has accelerated the digital agenda by about 3 years. So there's a lot of, and if you think about going back to my earlier point about now some of those exclusive type meetings, that were maybe only invite only, are now being opened up much more extensively. So I know the World Circular Economy Forum, they're restricting that to about 1,000 delegates, but I think the last session was open to everybody, 5,000 delegates. So, all the teams, Zoom, et al, is sort of happened to open up, it's providing a means to open up the discussion. Next slide, please. And one of the things that's really come out of this from the whole challenge of COVID, and I had it all my presentations. We got 3 mega trends. It's the age of acceleration of technology, acceleration of sort of environmental impacts, and globalization. But certainly one of the issues, next slide, please, that maybe is happening because of COVID. We got the next slide. Yeah, it is. It's really a questioning of some of the globalization model, and particularly people pulling back from China. And one of the things that I see emerging potentially with some of the recovery packages is the glocalization agenda, acting locally but thinking globally. And so I think, we've seen at a micro level, people in, I'm in the UK, we live in a close which is like 20 houses on a road or 30 houses. People are talking to one another. There's even been small sort of street parties, so there's this something happening at a local level. And I believe once we're able to get back, I mean, and it's a different situation in different countries, but at least in the UK context, I see the whole, issues around the community, engagement with people in the community is going to become, a much bigger issue because people will recognize what they've lost. Next slide, please. And so again, coming out of this and the study we did on the G20 and circular economy, what we found is really this fragmentation of the agenda, a lot of these global initiatives, but also this potential under the globalization agenda, or one level up from that, is the potential level of the development of so-called block economies. So you maybe get countries starting to work together on a sort of inter-country level, but also this regional level. And of course, if that does emerge more, that may be very positive in terms of local consumption and production and the potential for more circular models emerging, where we're retaining value in regional systems. And that provides opportunities for things like remanufacturing, repair, refurbishment, etc. Maybe even the growing of, growing of materials to go into locally produced products. So thinking about designing for the biological system there. So next slide, please. So, we're seeing a huge growth, a predicted growth in the use of materials. And this, the world cannot continue in this manner. So next slide, please. What we're seeing, is this, this big link between circularity and greenhouse gas emissions. So, various studies that are in our report, and there's a report that will be, or a paper that will be produced linked to that G20 thing, that there is a couple of studies there that saying circular economy approaches could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 60% by retaining existing value in products, materials, and components in existing systems rather than generating new materials and new products. But another thing that's coming out of, so I haven't got it in the slide, but I'm just thinking about it at the moment, is I'm also involved in something called TC323, which is an ISO standard, or a series of 4 ISO standards looking at circular economy that's come up as a result of, the international community saying, this is a serious issue, we need to get more clarity on the issues. So part of this, particularly in something called Working Group 1, there is real substantial work going on in terms of definitions, concepts, terminologies. So one of the key things there is again, I think we're quite grooved in the thinking around the sort of whole idea of retaining value in products, materials, and components in economic and social systems. But then if we're looking at, the potential for regeneration, if we get to beyond the sort of nice theoretical ideas of regeneration, which we see in some of the sort of think tanks and the NGOs, what does that really mean in practice? So I think that is quite interesting and less thought through. Areas like upcycling may well fall into this. And upcycling is sort of moving from a sort of niche area to areas where you're really starting to see new products, new businesses emerging, where people are looking about new uses for what may have formerly been thought of as waste. So one example I use is Elvis and Cressy. They picked up, fire hoses in the UK was going to landfill, actually, if you got this, you clean them up. There's a lot of fantastic material in there. And then they're producing bags, luxury bags that they're selling to Harrods in London. So you're getting, entirely different products by a creative perspective on value in materials rather than waste, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. And I think a lot of those ideas are moving from, nice little experiments to actually much more tangible things compared to 10 years ago. So the area of circularity is really starting to come in. We see particularly a lot of new initiatives emerging from millennial entrepreneurs who really they want a good business, but sustainability and within that circularity, they feel is almost an essential part of the way they want to take the businesses forward. Next slide, please. And I think that might accelerate because I think the Zs, as opposed to the millennials, the sort of Greta Thunberg generation, they're also about getting stuff done, it seems. It's not as straightforward as that. That's one aspect. But I think we're going to see, and I believe we're going to move into a fifth green consumer wave. We're already there on a fourth wave before COVID, but I think we're going to move, and we're maybe already in this next wave. So thinking about circular economy is very much at a regional, is a global dimension, but also a regional development level. Next slide, please. But also a granular level. It requires a lot of thinking, a lot of detailed thinking. And people are even talking about people like Walter Starhill, and there's a researcher, she's now a professor in Hamburg, going down to the atomic level and reassembling atoms in materials. So, really getting into some quite different ways of thinking. We've seen this already, that a company called Aquafil have developed a de and repolymerization process, eventually to break down nylon to, generate second, third, fourth life nylon. So again, the same level, can we apply that same thinking to metals and other materials? Next slide, please. So really importantly to me, circular economy is about reframing the discussion away from waste. It's not a waste discussion, it's a value discussion. How we retain value and even, regenerate value in economic and social systems for as long as possible. It's in products, materials, and components. Next slide, please. So it's not about waste. We need to get away from that. And we need to be thinking in life cycle terms that waste is much further down the line. Any of us have actually visited a community recycling center, particularly in sort of OECD country like the UK. The amount of value that is sitting just in those skips it's actually, sick making in any ways. People can really, so there's this, I think, social dimension to it as well. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm just having to move on quickly, guys, through this for the event. So it's really about this extended life cycle perspective, much more of a focus on the use phase than end of life. It's about how we get the stuff back into the systems, how we retain the stuff in the systems, and how we close first loop, second loop, etc. Next slide, please. So again, it is about designing for the circular economy at an economic level, a societal level, through to a company level, right down to a product or service level. Next slide, please. And it's about innovation at all levels. What we can do, incrementally right up to that systemic, level. Next slide, please. And it will be a transition. And it won't be necessarily easy, and it will take time. Many on the presentation will have seen the good old Elaine MacArthur framework that actually builds on the original McDonough-Brown framework that goes back to around about the early 2000s. So this is the idea of designing for the products for the biological system, the technical system. But in reality, in many ways, this is too simplistic, because for many products we include mixed materials. And so, one of on the one level, it's good practice. And for example, these, and if we had more time, I'd jump up and get a pair of them. It's something called Healthy Seas socks. They're star socks. They're socks that have got 3 components in them. They've got the Eco-Nile Second Life nylon. They've got organic cotton, and they've got elastomer. Sort of good in a couple of directions, but you get to the end of life, it goes straight to landfill, because you've got technical materials and you've got biomaterials in there. So what some of the people are looking at in the fashion sector, in the R&D side, are looking at the use of cellulosics, where materials can dissolve at the end of the first life, so you can get directly to the materials. So some innovative stuff going on. And next slide, please. So yeah, so this is the example. These socks, great, but it's actually going straight to landfill at the end of life. How do we design for separability? How do we design for single-use materials, for example? Next slide, please. But we are seeing some major companies, major large complex companies with multi-product divisions, really integrating circularity into their eco-design approaches. And again, in my view, the hierarchy is eco-design is about the integration of environmental considerations into product development and design. Circularity is one aspect of this. So you've seen Philips change their very well grouped 6 focal areas of eco-design now to include a specific focal area of circularity. And so they're looking at their systems about, can we, look at, the maintenance of the product design for maintenance, refurbishment, then if it goes a bit too far, can we harvest the parts to reuse? And then, then for materials recycling and landfill. So they're integrating this, at a product level, at a business level, and now even having goals for so-called circular products. And the chief executive is talking this in the public domain now. And even Philips are putting forward the idea of a so-called circular ready design standard, which is sort of interesting. But again, too much detail for the moment. We can pick it up in another session. Sorry, next slide, please. So, and this is also just about Lego, just showing how things are moving. They've been advertising, actually quite interesting, advertising for about the last 4 to 6 weeks for a couple of positions in circular product design. And I keep seeing them, re-advertising the job. Whether, I'd have thought there's got a lot of interest, but maybe whether they're finding enough people with enough experience around at the moment is another question. So, but again, all I'm showing this is to show that it's really, getting into the mainstream now. Next slide, please. And there are also now various entrepreneurs who are picking up circularity in their businesses. Next slide, please. And so this is iFixit, and effectively it's a guy who was from an Apple engineer. Effectively, they provide a service where they provide free online tutorials showing you how to fix your product. And the business model is so those really high quality tutorials show you how to deal with the problem. And then the business model is they sell you the tools and equipment to repair the products yourself. So this is now also picking up on a new segment of self-repairers, people who have got fed up with their products breaking down, and they're now getting more confident to have a go at fixing their own products. And that's been driven partially by a huge, I was going to say influx, but the word may be outflux of videos online showing people how to make stuff, how to modify and fix stuff. And this is becoming a very useful resource for people to get an idea about what they need to do practically. Next slide, please. And so this is in the technical system. You've got, you know, the iFixit dealing mainly with electronics and foams and various things. This is the Econile fiber that I mentioned before from Aquafil. This is the nylon, the depolymerized and repolymerized second life nylon, and it's derived from fishing nets, and it's going to carpets, etc. Next slide, please. Elvis and Cressy that I mentioned previously, you know, effectively fire hoses to bags sold through Harrods as a premium product. You know, a designer having a perspective, coming up with a product, commercializing the product. Next slide, please. So this is sort of upcycling of a technical product, then moving into the bio system in a sense. This is BioBean, and effectively they're producing briquettes from coffee grounds. And so they set up systems in London to collect the coffee grounds, and they produce, premium eco briquettes for home heating. And I think they've done so well that they may have even sold the business now. And there are others that are starting to look at, you know, how you can reuse coffee grounds, you know, in various forms. Next slide, please. So this is Deserto. They're basically taking cactus and actually producing a so-called vegan leather. There's about 3 or 4 vegan leathers now emerging, but one of the issues with at least 2 of these vegan leathers, again, you've got this mixed material issue. You've got the natural fibers in there, but they're including polymers there to bind the materials. So still on the one hand good, but at the end of life, you've got mixed materials there again. So a lot of this stuff is sort of moving in the right direction, but isn't quite there yet. Next slide, please. So again, there's a paradigm shift going on, and just in closing here, at a high level, next slide, please. We've got a lot of discussion about Industry 4.0, cyber physical systems, machine learning, you know, robotics, augmented reality, and I even picked up extended reality as another technology that I still haven't got my head around what that, in fact, that means, but it is an actual technology. So all these raft of different technologies that are coming on board. Next slide. But I actually believe there is actually a reindustrialization going on linked to this that sort of started a little bit before, you know, the COVID perhaps drive for this globalization. So this reindustrialization 2.0 is much more decentralized. It's about making, modifying, and fixing at a local level. And it's the potential to be smarter, more low carbon and circular. Next slide, please. And so this is much more grassroots innovation. This is coming bottom up, not top down. Next slide, please. And so this is a new movement of makers, modifiers, and fixers. So modifiers and fixers. So come back, next slide, please. And you know, this trend is sort of being picked up in Wired and various different magazines, but they're generally not picking up the modification and the fixing. They're picking up the making, but not the other aspects. Next slide, please. And this is very much being driven, linked into my earlier point about the proliferation now of videos online, where you can go up, you can see how to make something and even fix something, and it's not in a 25-page manual in 7 point. You can sort of see it, get the idea, and yeah, I'll have a go now. So it's something about, you know, enabling people, and for, you know, maybe some on the call, this is just normal for them, but some of us who are a bit older, this is about 10 years old. It's still relatively new if you look at it in that sense. So you've got the online video resource emerging. Next slide, please. But also places and spaces to enable people to make, modify, and fix. So places and spaces. Next slide, please. And these include maker spaces, hacker spaces, and repair cafes. And I'll just focus on the repair cafes for time here. There are now about 2,100 repair cafes in the world, and these were really accelerating before COVID. But still, there have been ones that have actually come on board during COVID, which is interesting. Particularly, I look at it within the UK. I don't know how they've quite done it under the restrictions, but they have been doing it. But this is still very skewed towards Europe, although there are blocks of repair cafes in Australia and the US, and they grow in the US. So a significant proportion of the repair cafes are in the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium. Surprisingly, this is another discussion, there are very few in Scandinavia, where you'd have thought there'd be a lot because of green and social, but for some reason they're not so evolved in Scandinavia. I don't know about Finland. Maybe Duncan can pick that up in his presentation, but I was quite surprised. It's really started in the Netherlands, very evolved. Next slide, please. And I know a little bit about this because we led 3 global surveys on repair cafes. So we've done some global research into this area, but also we're doing it through a repair cafe that we set up. So essentially we see people getting together and individually fixing products in repair cafes. Next slide, please. So yeah. So collaborative approaches. Next slide, please. And essentially, repair cafes are community workshops where people bring products to be repaired by volunteer repairers. And those volunteer repairers are often retired or semi-retired people who've got, we find, amazing skills. And that would generally sit around electronics, mechanical, bicycles, clothing, and furniture generally. And I sort of know a little bit about that because we set one up, and we're now 60 sessions down the line. We set up as the first UK charity. And what we've set it up, apart from a social initiative, social innovation, circular social initiative, is set up a bit of a living laboratory, wearing my academic hat, where we're collecting data since we launched. So we've got tremendous data on impact there. And I've been very key to promote the impact. This is real. This is not fake news. Come along, experience it, see it, it's real. So effectively, and this is actually still an amazing figure to me, consistently across our surveys and consistently across our repair cafes, on average, there's a 65% repair rate in repair cafes. So despite products not being designed for, generally speaking, not being designed for repairability or dismantleability, products can be repaired with the right skills. But it doesn't preempt the fact that products, there should be maybe stronger policy to remove built-in product obsolescence, particularly at the cheaper end of the market. So what we do is we weigh all the products so we can identify diversion from landfill, and we've got some sort of clever maths that help us convert it into carbon emissions. So that actually figure now has improved also to £105,000 worth of savings to citizens. We identify the opportunity cost saved by extending the life of the product, what it would have cost to buy a new product. So we're up to over 100,000. And next slide, please. And I'll just come to the end here. You'll be pleased to hear, Cheyenne. What we've also done is we've been able to get a small amount of funding, and we've produced a free repair carbon calculator, which is based on it's a very simple to use tool, but it's behind that, there's quite a complicated bit of mathematics and evidence, let's say. So essentially, you can put in a product there, you can put in its weight, and what that tool will spit out is the carbon savings if you're able to repair it. And that's free and available to anybody. But again, we show this link between the repair as part of circularity and the carbon savings. Next slide, please. So but what we're also doing, and this is not because of me, but because the amazing people involved, is we've also pioneered some repairs using 3D printing. Again, a lot of people are talking about 3D printing and forwards manufacturing, but we've been completing some customized repairs using 3D printing. And that is our largest purchase to date. Importing it from the Czech Republic, who will no longer, because of Brexit and the paperwork, supply any spares. Interesting point. So we maybe have to 3D print our own spares for our own machine. Next slide, please. So in closing, what we've also done is innovate during COVID. And we've ended up producing a Facebook advice service for citizens. They can post in a query on repair, and we have our repairers will help provide advice. And then we've provided 2 COVID secure repair sessions when we were able to. And part of that was to really innovate our model. And we moved all our booking systems online. And it's an example of how the constraint of COVID has forced us to adapt and actually move forward and actually potentially develop a better model. You know, we want to move back to the physical model, but we'll take aspects of this innovation into our model. So just in closing here, repair cafes are about what they say on the tin. People come to repair cafes, and particularly our repair cafe, to get a product repaired. And the majority of times they will come out with a product repaired. For the first time, they come in and they're not really quite sure what to expect. They've heard about it, whatever, but when they come out of the repair cafe, they get this tremendous sense of the local community, the social dimension, that connection with people. And of course, that's something you can't get in the online models. So absolutely, repair cafes are about the environmental and that social dimension. So, and just I think in closing, and bring it back to the round table's focus. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I had the city of Vienna, some researchers in the city of Vienna joined me, and I had a chat with them, and they were very much thinking about how they could design repair cafes into communities as part of building resilience, the social capital, you know, let's say circular social capital in terms of communities. So the idea then is most repair cafes are citizen driven, but you know, at that community level, could you actually more deliberately design in repair cafes as part of a broader community innovation? Next slide, please. And I think this hopefully should be the last slide. Yes. And just in really closing here, this is something that we tried to do again on this social connection thing. I developed something called Repair Connections, like the little pun there, online. And in a sense, this was really a bit of networking between citizens, you know, really just talking about their experience of repair. And what we found out there was a grandfather at the top left-hand corner was mentoring his 11-year-old grandson on how to repair products. And the 11-year-old lad just decided, without it being prepared at all, that he would repair a light live online. And he did it. And it was just a very nice intergenerational issue there about sharing the knowledge and the skills. And again, thinking about, as far as I understand it, the aRoundTable platform idea. I think this is something you can perhaps try and build on, you know, maybe, because I think there's something there. And I'll shut up there. Sorry, it's gone on a little bit longer than I think was my time, but hopefully it was 1 or 2 things that were of interest to the audience there.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Yeah, we'll try to move this along as well quickly. I think there are some questions for you in the chat that you can maybe answer by typing. And then next we'll have Duncan Mays. He's the founder and principal of Lingnutech Oi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly, Duncan. And he'll be sharing some examples of initiatives in cities and communities involving big companies creating circular economy projects. Duncan, I'm not sure if you're able to unmute. And
me, I think. Oh,
There we go. Now we can hear you.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Nice to see you all. Yeah, Duncan, Mason, thanks very much to the introduction, and thanks Martin also. A lot of interconnections in what I'm also going to be talking about today. And firstly, just picking up on your point of, yes, repair cafes. I'm not aware of any really here in Finland. There might be some, but I just haven't spotted them, but it's certainly not a big thing right now. And I think, yeah, through the Nordic region, possibly in Denmark, but I don't think here in Finland it's really taken off yet. Advanced in many things, but maybe not in repair cafes. But hopefully, once this COVID situation is clear, then we'll see an opportunity there. So no, yeah, Duncan Mays, and I'm sitting in Helsinki. I'm working, running my own business now called Lignotech Oy, but I've spent practically my whole career actually in the forest products industry. So I come from the renewable materials industry. I've got quite a sort of leaning towards that sort of perspective, and also in my presentation. But the topic of circularity, I think, is something that the forest industry and the renewable materials industry has probably taken their eye off the ball a little bit in the last years, based on the fact that the thought was, well, okay, we're telling the environmental story, we've got a renewable material, etc. That then we're going to ride the wave with that. But I think there is now a clear realization also amongst this industry, the forest industry, that hey, we got to do more than just deliver a renewable material to the cities. We've actually got to ensure that it actually stays and is circular, and so it's possible to reuse this material. If we just I move now, hopefully I can control the slides.
I think you should be able to now.
Okay, if you just let me get control of it. Yep, there it is. Okay, so oops, we went too far. So we start in the cities. This is where, as it says there, the vast majority of GDP is generated in cities. Australia, where I just was recently residing, nearly 80% of the population lives in large cities. We're seeing the continued urbanization trend everywhere globally. So effectively, the cities are the point where all of the materials finally end up, which are produced, and in many cases then a large amount of that material is coming from further afield. It's transported into cities effectively. Cities generate well over 50% of the waste, or hopefully we won't call it waste in the future, but at the moment we refer to it as waste, and then obviously generating well over 60% of the greenhouse gases. You've just seen the Ellen MacArthur presentation on the previous with Martin, and basically what I wanted to show here is definitely, we've got two flows at the moment, the renewable materials flow, and then the stocks of finite resources flows. And as Martin quite rightly said, what we actually see though is a far more complex situation, because in many cases these materials are intertwined with each other in the products that we consume and use. The real challenge, as I see it right now, is in actually the effective collection, sorting, and optimization, and basically creating a situation where we can reuse these materials, because in many countries it's not really functioning at all. The technology in some cases is not really up to speed yet. There are some advances in near infrared technologies to identify chemical components in wood or in other materials which can separate materials, but look, I think that the reality is that the recycling systems in many countries and in many cities have not really caught up with the demands of a circular economy yet. So there's a major bottleneck there, and a need for innovation and development that front. Energy recovery. I'll get onto this one a little bit more, because this is a bit of a tough topic, this one, because some countries have taken a policy on actually municipal solid waste to energy as the primary strategy. Take countries like Switzerland. I think the vast majority of the plastic which is recycled is going to energy production. Other countries, of course, are trying to take a more approach of trying to get more value out of that plastic that's recycled. But it really is creating an interesting dynamic right now. And then there's also the topic of burning virgin wood fibers for energy. UK is one of the biggest importers of wood pellets in the world. Big company called Drax imports well over 1 million tons of wood pellet from North America every year to replace coal in the power stations of the north of the UK. But it's burning virgin wood fiber. And that's being subsidized, that business. So there's some big question marks about, let's say, using renewable and virgin materials for energy, which there needs to be a lot of debate about that going forward. I just try to get my slide back on now. There it is. It's not moving forward. It's stuck. Seems to be a bit of a time lag with here we go. Okay, so and there still was one before that, sorry. I'm having some time lag problems here. Here we go. So an example of a very interesting case of let's say, an internal circular economy, and that's the British sugar case in the Wissington plant in the UK, actually, which has created a pretty impressive circular process within their whole site. So the input is about 2.5 million tons of sugar beet plus shale and stone and soil, etc., into the plant every year. And they've developed an amazing interconnection of processes to actually valorize and collect all the different streams coming out. So they take the topsoil, which is still on the beet, and then that's sold back into the industry. They take the aggregates, and that's sold to industry. They take the peels off the sugar beet, and that's converted. For example, they can take components of that and make it into bioethanol. They're of course the primary product they're trying to produce is sugar, so they're taking that. But then from their lime kilns, they're getting lime, which can go to agriculture. So they've created a really impressive, let's say, internal ecosystem, basically with a very much a circular viewpoint there. So I wanted to just show that there is opportunities for circularity within within an industrial operation. For some reason, these are jumping now. I'm not sure why. Let's see. Then hopefully it'll stop now and doesn't move again. We have an example then of obviously something like Tetra Pak. We all know the cartons and the Tetra Pak. As Martin also referred earlier, these are complex composites actually. This is not just a piece of fiber. This contains multiple different materials. It has polymers, it has foils, it has wood fibers, it has fillers, etc. in it. And Tetra Pak being one of the world's largest producers of this type of board material, obviously are now taking a much stronger position on basically whole of life responsibility, and are teaming up with entities like Veolia, etc., to ensure that the target is to ensure that all of their Tetra Pak products, materials and components are recycled within this timeline. There isn't actually, there's this technology out there now, and the company I used to work for actually here in Finland once had a mill in Barcelona, which sadly they sold, but anyway, it's a mill which has got a technology which can very smartly break down these different components which make up a Tetra Pak. So you can separate out the aluminium foil layer, you can remove the polymer layer, and you can basically then get the regenerated fibers, cellulosic fibers, and make new board out of it. And then the remaining small amount of polymer is used as energy. So there's a pyrolysis process which is used already today and is available. So we just need to see a greater advancement of that type of technology to ensure that we can get real circularity in these materials, which are, quite complex. Another example, and this is not for a short lifespan product like a Tetra Pak product. I'm talking here about buildings, and many of you may be aware and have been following the revolution in massive timber construction, which is occurring globally now. Massive timber elements and development of more off-site manufacturing and pre-assembly and construction. So one of the great things of off-site manufacturing and pre-assembly is that you effectively, in your manufacturing process, you can limit the amount of waste or side stream material being generated through optimization and robotization of processing. But at the same time, then it gives you an opportunity to have your side stream materials that you are getting offcuts or whatever. You have an opportunity to manage those materials in a central location rather than being distributed out on a building site somewhere. So this advancement in offsite manufacturing construction is really going to be a great benefit, I think, to this. The other key thing which is emerging in the construction space is the so-called design for whole of life thinking. And this was a schematic actually developed by a leading company called aRoundTable. And they basically have, they work on the principle of how will this building be deconstructed and how can it be repurposed at the end of its useful service life. I mean, many buildings, they're expected to last for 50 years, etc. But at the same time, they are now building into their design and architecture and building methodologies means with which to ensure that when the next generation or the generation after is requiring to reuse that building or reuse the components used to construct that building, there will be logic in how to disassemble and potentially repurpose these elements, which are currently built out of, as I said, out of wood, massive timber, for example. So this is a really advancing area, and thankfully, the construction industry is starting to think now in these terms, and this is of great benefit to things like massive timber, which is lighter weight and easier to disassemble than concrete. Then we jump onto a major, the big blue and yellow furniture company. So they've obviously had a global strategy, and I love the term glocalization. Thanks for that, Martin. And this is where I'm actually going to, we have some real similar views and experiences here. IKEA, when I first started in the wood industry years ago, we used to sell wood from the sawmill that I was based at here in Finland to China. And lo and behold, that same wood, which had been processed into furniture, into a flat pack, would end up back in Finland or back in Sweden or wherever. And it had just gone back and forth, basically, and processed in a low-cost, cheap manufacturing environment, and then brought back to Europe. About I don't know, is it seven to 8 years ago, I think IKEA realized that this is not a sustainable strategy. And they've clearly been moving to what I call a regional strategy. And so now basically pretty much all the furniture that we use and consume here in Europe, for example, is manufactured here in Europe from primarily, if it's wood anyway, from European wood. Of course, they're still importing plastic products, I think, from Asia, but the wood materials are manufactured in Europe and consumed in Europe. And similar case in the US. They have their site at Danville. It's a major center for their operations there. And then in China, they serve basically China, Greater China, and Southeast Asia and Australasia from that facility. So they've clearly aiming to reduce their logistical carbon footprint, and probably also, with awareness that something is amiss, and they can't continue this global flow of materials. It's having very negative impacts. What they're also now starting to do in some, certainly here in Helsinki, but then also the IKEA stores in Melbourne when I was still there, they're having a buyback concept. So you basically can buy take your furniture, this used furniture, back to IKEA, and they buy it back from you actually at a certain price. That's the first stage of their strategy, to show that they're taking an active role in creating a reuse policy and a reuse strategy. I think that probably what they will be doing next is then looking at okay, what about the furniture that no one can use anymore because it has been broken? Okay, now maybe they can go to take them to the repair cafes. But the other possibility, of course, is that they will be looking at technologies which will enable them to break down the materials into constituents which can be then reformed into new furniture products or something similar. So I think that's a clear message that we're moving away from global movement of materials. We're going towards a more regional approach, and then at the same time, big companies leading the way in terms of circularity. Another one, which I'm now personally involved in, I've recently connected up with MDF Recovery in the UK. This is basically a startup business which has developed a very interesting and unique technology to recycle medium density fiberboard. And of course, the company who was just on the previous slide should be extremely interested in this, because they are one of the biggest users of MDF in the world, with all their furniture products. And effectively, this technology this company has developed enables the breakdown of the glue and the fibers, which are very strongly bound together using the current glue systems, to bring out fibers which are having very similar properties and length of fiber and strength of fiber as the original fiber which was used to make the original MDF. In additionally, what they've been doing is developing the potential of using this fiber in, for example, insulation material. So this is an excellent example of how a very difficult to recycle material like medium density fiberboard is now potentially, through technology, finding a new home and a new way of using it. One of the biggest challenges, now I'm starting to dig into this business and get involved in it. One of the biggest challenges facing this now is actually the recycling system, and the ability to sort out the material in a form which is somehow compatible with usability in this type of process. So ensuring that it's clean enough in some respects. The other key thing is that there's such a high value on this in terms of the energy market. So the price that the energy sector is ready to pay for this types of material just to create an energy is causing some challenges in saying, well, okay, is it better to burn this, or because we can get that much money for the energy value versus recirculating it and making it into new products. So that's where I come back to the topic I raised earlier, is that the big challenge here actually is energy versus circularity and reuse. And this is something which is something, you know, we all need to be aware of and be prepared to address in some way. Then another example of a company which I have had some involvement with, and this is an Australian technology development company called Licella. They have initially they started their business on actually developing a technology and a process to refine and process a byproduct from the coal mining industry, and then from that, then they moved into developing usage for wood fibers and waste wood materials, lignocellulosic materials, to convert these side streams and materials into biocrude. And the biocrude, of course, then can go further into refineries to make, for example, usage into biodiesel, or it can then potentially go into different biochemicals through fractionation technologies. So they've basically got a couple of joint ventures now, one in the UK. Now it's actually changed from Armstrong Energy to Mura, and they've just recently done a JV with a large technology company, and they're going to build the first CAT HTR hydrothermal liquefaction technology, basically to convert waste plastics into plastic crude, as they're calling it, and that plastic crude potentially can be broken down the ring, broken and opened, and then new chemicals extracted from that, or if not, then fuel enhancers. And then with their partner in Canada, Canfor, they're now working with pulp mill residues for using the similar technology to make a bio crude and their advanced fuels and biochemicals from that. So I think this is a couple of examples of how you can use both renewable materials and also finite resource materials with this type of technology to create new value products. In closing, this is really interesting because it again resonates very much with what Martin was saying. What I tried to do here was to take the waste management hierarchy, the most recent one, i.e. reduce, reuse, recycle, recover, and disposal. And what we see with this is that, of course, disposal and landfill is the absolute last choice. Recover is effectively, let's make energy out of it. And there you see, the position of energy, according to the EU, is that it's not high on the hierarchy. It's down there, one up from disposal in landfill. What I've tried to do here is to actually then take that thinking and then put it into the context of urban regional circular economies, and create a very similar type of perspective towards this glocalization thinking. And how we can actually, how there should be incentives, government incentives and legislative incentives to minimize movement of raw materials from one side of the world to the other, and then basically process it somewhere locally, and then create which is traditional linear economy approach, towards focusing on, once it's in the city, once it's in the urban environment, how can we create that sort of circular loop which will enable the materials to continue to remain in that environment. And so in terms of let's say big government support, if we want to call it that, this is how incentives should be generated, which will drive us away from allowing unnecessary transportation of raw materials. A good example is New Zealand. I'm amazed to see New Zealand shipping logs, trees, they cut down the radiata pine logs, and then they ship these logs to China, and then they let the Chinese process those logs and value add on those logs. Logs in general, when they're cut down green, they contain anything up to 70 to 80% of water. So that makes New Zealand one of the biggest water exporters. So, you know, it doesn't make sense to be moving these large materials, raw materials around, and you know, promotion of circular, localized, regionalized economies has to be sort of presented in this way going forward. And as I said, that resonates so well with what Martin was saying as well. So in some challenges, as I said, separation technologies and advancement of the recycling industry is still a major bottleneck and a major challenge. And that's where there needs to be now high levels of innovation and support. And then I'm sure that there are plenty of entrepreneurial people out there, businesses out there, ready to try to make a value out of that material. So with that, thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Duncan. And I know that Martin actually had to drop out as well. And I know that we're also running a bit over time. So perhaps if you have any questions for Duncan, you can add them in the chat, and maybe Duncan, you can answer them in the chat. And then I think Martin also shared his email address in case any of you have specific questions for him as well. So we'll quickly move through the next set of slides, just to kind of introduce the aRoundTable process and wrap up this session. Like I said, this recording is, this session is being recorded. So if any of you have to drop out because of any time limitations, we'll send you the recording so you can catch up at any point. And then if you have any specific questions, I think we can have Duncan provide his email address as well, if any of you want to get in touch with him with any specific questions. So yeah, thank you very much to both Martin and Duncan for sharing their perspectives on the circular economy. And this kind of idea of regional economies, urban economies, very community specific activities is really at the heart of what we're trying to do with aRoundTable, trying to activate these kinds of initiatives in different communities around the world. So just to give you all a bit of history and vision for aRoundTable, last year in 2020, we kind of created this concept and had an initial event with 9 communities from different geographies to brainstorm some of the examples that Martin and Duncan shared to see how we could activate those kinds of projects in different communities around the world. And then this year, we're going to have a more structured design thinking approach with specific steps and templates and tools in order to bring together lots of different stakeholders, both from the government, from companies, citizens, et cetera, to really think about how to create some of these kinds of initiatives and projects in local communities. And then in the future, we hope that this can be sort of an annual event series to really engage communities and different stakeholders in order to design and develop projects and get them involved to create circular solutions. So that's kind of the objective that we have with aRoundTable. And just to provide an overview of the kind of event series, our event series takes 4 different steps, following kind of a design thinking approach, similar to what Martin shared in terms of design for the circular economy. We're following kind of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and IDEO guide for how do you design circular solutions. And it really consists of kind of understanding the problem, mapping different problems and solutions that already exist, defining specific issues and areas to tackle, whether it's a specific industry, specific waste streams, or specific topics. And then to kind of invite companies, government officials, citizens, designers, et cetera, to either enhance existing solutions or come up with new solutions to problems that they've identified in order to make prototypes and pilot projects in their communities, inspired by some of the things that you saw that Duncan and Martin shared that are already happening in different places around the world. And then the last step with the aRoundTable process is really to develop an implementation plan and a way to scale these ideas to involve more organizations and really build partnerships maybe with other organizations in the communities or even other communities around the world to really scale up the ideas. So we'll just kind of quickly share with you how the Roundtable event series process will work and how to engage different kinds of participants. So the kind of key stakeholders that we see getting involved in this kind of process in different communities around the world are citizens, so everyday people, NGOs, community organizations. Martin mentioned Repair Cafe, for example, and Duncan mentioned different kinds of companies working on circular economy projects. So we want to involve these kind of citizen organizations, businesses, government officials. As was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of regulatory challenges that need to be overcome in order to implement various circular economy solutions. So inviting them as well to understand what are the bottlenecks preventing some of these amazing ideas from happening and what they can do in order to relieve those bottlenecks and activate circular solutions is necessary. So with a roundtable, we're hoping that this event series involves all these different kinds of stakeholders in order to get them to co-design and co-develop solutions locally within each of our communities. And essentially the timeline is, today is kind of the launch for the event. And essentially what we'll do is have one event every 4 to 6 weeks. So we're planning to have a first session in March, a second session in April, a third in May, and a fourth in July, following this kind of design thinking process and all these steps to create circular solutions with all of our different community stakeholders. And then in the summer, essentially have time for some of these ideas to further develop and get activated through pilots or initial example projects. And then what we hope to do is by the end of this year, in October 2021, when we have Circular Cities Week, we'd love to be able to highlight some of the projects that come out of this process and how different communities are activating circular economy solutions in their communities. So that's kind of the process that we plan to follow with the roundtable process. So the first session on the 30th of March, we're essentially going to have all of the different communities who want to participate in a roundtable gather on the 30th in different Zoom sessions. So in order to kind of make it easier for different time zones to participate, we'll have one session for Asia and the Pacific, so Australia, New Zealand, Asia, etc. We'll have one time zone for Europe and Africa, so all those communities can come together at that time. And we'll have one time zone for the Americas, North and South America. And essentially during that event, the kind of Zoom event, we'll have all the communities come together and map all the different problems that are facing their communities, whether it's pollution issues, waste issues, specific bottlenecks that are preventing circular economy from happening, et cetera. And we'll also have them essentially map existing solutions to tackle these problems. So what are things already happening in our different communities, and where are the gaps that exist where we still need to focus, essentially. And so each of the communities that you all are a part of will have breakout rooms in order to have these discussions. And we have a few local organizers already signed up in different cities around the world. So if you are interested in involving your city or community in the session, we'd love to get you involved, and we'll share more later about how to do so. And yeah, essentially we're going to be using Miro, this kind of online whiteboard tool to facilitate these discussions. So we've already set up instructions and templates for all the different communities. So you can see on this image, there's a kind of space for Milan and Florence and Nakuru/Nairobi to kind of come together. And essentially each of these communities will have their own space in order to brainstorm, at least for this first session, as I mentioned, all the different problems that are facing, that the communities are facing, what are causing those problems, what are the symptoms of those problems, and what kind of solutions exist. So it's really kind of the initial stages of mapping all the potential opportunities for the circular economy in our communities. The discussions will sort of happen in these breakout rooms during Zoom, so they can be held in whatever local languages are more convenient for each of the communities, but we'll make sure that all the outcomes are going to be presented in English, so that we'll be able to compile across all the communities around the world what are all the key problems and challenges that different cities and communities are facing, and what are kind of interrelated links and commonalities around the world, essentially. And then the following sessions will have a similar format. We'll have these kind of Zoom sessions regionally, and we'll have different templates to walk each of the communities and their different stakeholders through prioritizing problems, designing solutions, developing plans in order to create circular economy projects. And then we'll make sure that all of the outcomes from the communities are shared in order to facilitate exchange of ideas and potential collaboration. So it could be that the Milan team, for example, collaborates with the Melbourne team or other communities globally in order to co-design projects across the world as well. So really kind of following the glocalization term that both Duncan and Martin mentioned. So yeah, if you're interested in joining a roundtable, you can sign up as a participant. If you already see one of the communities on our website, we have all the kind of participating cities listed. Or if you don't see your city listed and you want to be an organizer, well, we'd love to kind of engage you and your local communities as well to be part of the effort. We have sort of room for one more community from Europe. There's a lot more room for communities from the Americas and a lot more room for communities from Australia and Asia. And we'd love to kind of chat with you to kind of organize the templates for you and let you know how you can get involved to really help co-design circular economy solutions with the key stakeholders in your communities. Yeah, and I realize that we're short of time, but if anyone has any kind of questions, you can kind of add them to the chat here, and we'll try to answer them, or you can kind of reply to us. I'll put the email address for our aRoundTable account, so that you can also email us if you have any questions as well. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any quick questions. Otherwise, I realize that we're well over time, so I can answer any immediate questions that you all have in the next 5 or so minutes. And then I just sent the email address as well for Roundtable if you'd like to learn more about how you can get involved and get engaged. I think there's not so many people left as well. So if you have any specific questions, you can feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions. And like I mentioned, this session is recorded, so we'll basically provide the recording to all of you in case you want to share it to any interested parties who might want to get involved in a roundtable. Yeah, I think we had a question from Dario. Yes, so I think there are some Italian communities involved in a roundtable. I think we have the team from Milan and a team from Florence, and I believe both of those teams will likely have their discussions in Italian during the events when they go to their breakout rooms, and then the outcomes that they develop, the ideas and kind of solutions and problems that they've identified, will be just posted in English in the Miro whiteboard, but the conversations during the events will probably happen in Italian. Yeah, and I think we have other communities as well in Portugal, and they'll be speaking in Portuguese, I think, during their breakout sessions. So all of the conversations, et cetera, will happen locally in the native languages. But when we do the kind of presentation of the outcomes in those templates that I shared earlier, they'll be in English, so we can kind of identify which communities are facing similar problems, which communities have similar solutions, and what are opportunities for collaboration across the world. Great. Well, if there are no more questions, I can end the session here. Thank you very much for joining our kickoff for a roundtable. Like I said, we'll send you the recording of this session in case you want to watch it again or share it amongst people who weren't able to attend the event today. And we'll soon be sharing more details about that first session on the 30th of March. So you can sign up for that, either join some of the existing communities, or if you want to be an organizer, please definitely reach out to us, and we'd love to kind of chat with you one-on-one about how to facilitate sessions locally in your city. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.